What's up, guys? Welcome to the Second Take. I'm Zach.
And I'm Jonah.
And we're back after a little 3-week hiatus. We're back to talk about the NFL. There was not really anything going on in sports, as you guys know. Our last podcast was about NBA free agency, which ended in like 48 hours. And then there was a whole lot of nothing until now. So we figured since this past weekend was the last weekend without football, until after the Super Bowl, we would talk about football now. So we're going to get into our previews. We're going to start with the AFC. We're going to break it up into 4 podcasts. So this week will be AFC West and AFC South. And then after that, next week we'll do East and North, and then move on to the NFC and do the same kind of thing. So we're going to get started in the AFC West with the defending champion Denver Broncos, and I'm going to let Jonah start.
Yeah, so this is a pretty weak defending champion. I think you'd agree with that assessment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Certain members of this team don't think they're going to make the playoffs even this year. I'm not sure if I'm on board with that prediction because their defense is still absolutely top-notch, but their offense is definitely looking questionable, starting with the fact that their presumptive starting quarterback is a guy some of you might have heard of by the name of Mark Sanchez.
And some of you might have heard of, which is scary because that means some of you may not have heard of, and that's not a quarterback you want as your starting quarterback, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, that's the biggest thing with them. I mean, everybody knew throughout the season that there was a good chance Peyton Manning would not be back next year, and that ended up being true. They won some games with Brock Osweiler at quarterback, but they ended up letting him walk to Houston. We'll be talking a little bit more about him later in this podcast, but I think it's a defensible decision to let Osweiler walk because you could say he was a product of the system. He didn't look super impressive in his starts. He wasn't necessarily a must-have, but they didn't do much else to address the position. There was rumors they might trade for Colin Kaepernick. That didn't ultimately happen. What they did do was draft Paxton Lynch towards the end of the first round, but he's pretty much regarded as a project quarterback. He won't be starting for a couple of years unless Sanchez is really, really terrible. So right now you have a defending Super Bowl champion rolling with Mark Sanchez at quarterback and a pretty weak-looking offensive line. So this team is probably going to struggle to score points.
Yeah, and don't overlook Trevor Siemian starting. He's been in the system for a couple of years, and I think he was okay in college. Obviously, that doesn't really translate. Playing at Northwestern as a quarterback doesn't make you a good NFL quarterback, but he still knows the system a little bit, and Mark Sanchez is Mark Sanchez, so, there's a chance he could start. I like Paxton Lynch. I just don't think he's ready. But for their offense, luckily, they still have Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders, who are great receivers. They got a new offensive line, but most of they kind of traded good players for good players, more or less. So it's more of the same and a good standard offensive line. And then their running backs, they re-signed Anderson, got Hillman still, and then drafted Devontae Booker, who I like a lot from Utah. So I think they got better. They just obviously don't have anyone to throw the ball, which is a serious problem. But they still have their defense. They lost Malik Jackson to the Jaguars and Danny Trevathan to the Bears. So they lost their leading tackler and someone who was a Pro Bowler and an All-Pro. Very good players, but they still have a great secondary. The defense is still good enough. Probably a top 5 defense still. I'm a little afraid about the offense.
Yeah, there's no question that it was the defense that won the Broncos the Super Bowl last year, led primarily by Von Miller, who I would argue is the best defensive player in football. So they're going to win a bunch of games based on their defense. This isn't going to be some 6-10 team, even with Mark Sanchez at quarterback. This is one of the better defenses the NFL has seen in a while. But obviously, it goes back to the offense. I think I'm a little bit of a bigger believer in Mark Sanchez than most people. I wouldn't say that makes me a huge believer in Mark Sanchez because most people don't believe in him at all. But he did reach 2 AFC Championship games with a Jets team that is probably not as good as this Broncos team. His time with the Eagles was certainly not successful.
Good for the Giants.
Yeah.
He threw it to my team a lot. It was nice.
I know. Yeah, even my team a little bit. But it was definitely not a good situation for him. This seems like a better situation, and if he can take advantage of that and put together at least like a semi-average season, this team has a chance to be really good again. Because don't forget, Peyton Manning was not,
Oh, he wasn't great.
Like, this was not a great offensive team last year even, and they still won the Super Bowl.
Right. So what do you think for the record is going to be this year?
I think that they're going to go 10-6 and make the playoffs.
Okay. So I have them at.
Going to be last year, but I still think they're a good team.
Yeah. So Jonah just was talking about how Mark Sanchez led the Jets to 2 AFC Championship games, and the one difference I see in that with the Jets and Broncos, the Broncos team that he's playing for right now is better than the Jets team, but the division the Broncos are playing in, I think, is better than what the Jets played in. Obviously, the Patriots are by far the better team in either division at the time or now, but the Bills and the Dolphins at that time were like atrocious, worse than they are now, which is saying something. And so that was like, you play each of those teams twice a year. Obviously, that's 4 automatic wins for the Jets. And they still beat the Patriots here and there, too. So, like, they were a good team. But
Chargers are pretty bad, but there's not a lot of easy wins on this Broncos schedule for sure.
Right.
You got to play all the best teams in the other divisions as well. Like, they'll be facing Pittsburgh and New England.
And they open their season against Carolina.
Right. So this isn't going to be an easy road for them. There's no doubt about that.
Exactly.
But I think enough to get them to 10 wins.
Yeah, so like the beginning of the schedule is even difficult. So like you don't really have a learning curve. You kind of have to hit the ground running and find a way to win some games. I think they're going to struggle. I have them at 7-9 and not making the playoffs. I know. I thought that would surprise you.
Yeah, I mean, the AFC is interesting because in the NFC you kind of have more really good teams, but also more really bad teams.
Yeah.
And in the AFC you kind of got a lot of teams that you could see maybe as wild card teams, and we'll get into them over the next couple of weeks. But I think it's going to be a dogfight for the playoff spots in the AFC. There's only probably 4 teams in the AFC that I can't see making the playoffs.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Yeah, I mean there's a lot of teams you could see that are like from 6-10 to 8-8 basically.
Right. I mean, yeah, I don't think there's any team. I mean, one of these teams is going to go 2-14 because that happens. But like, to me, other than Cleveland, none of these teams look like they're definitely going to be awful.
Yeah. I mean, the Titans maybe, but who knows?
Right.
All right, let's go to the Chargers now. Do you want to start again?
Yeah, sure. So the Chargers, I think, are clearly the weakest team in the AFC West. Is that a fair assessment, you think?
I think they're the weakest, yeah.
They have some pieces. I mean, Phillip Rivers is a good quarterback. He kind of has a little bit of the Tony Romo label of can't win a big game, which is, I think, somewhat deserved in both cases. I'm not gonna sugarcoat that. But he's still a good quarterback. He's led this team to big seasons before. I just think they've done a lot of work on this roster, but it still looks kind of like it looked last year to me, and except for they don't have Eric Weddle, who was their best defensive player, and their defense was already pretty bad, especially their secondary. I mean, Jason Verrett turned into a great cornerback, but other than that, Brandon Flowers is nowhere near what he used to be. Their defense in general looks pretty weak. They haven't been able to get much of a pass rush. I mean, they're hoping Joey Bosa, their first-round pick, will solve that, but he remains unsigned by the Chargers, which can't be a good thing, considering he's the last first-round pick to not be signed, and he was the 3rd pick in the draft. So there's problems with this Chargers team. It doesn't seem to me to be very well run. I don't think Mike McCoy is a very good coach, and I just see this team kind of treading water and being a bad to mediocre team again this year.
Yeah, I mean, last year they drafted Melvin Gordon, who they thought was going to be a superstar, or at least a good running back, and he was atrocious. Didn't even score. He had a hard time. Didn't score for a while. Rivers is still a pretty good quarterback. I mean, he was drafted 4th by the Giants, and then they traded him for Eli. Anyway, long story short, we win the deal, but he's still good. Puts up big numbers. Throws for 5,000 yards sometimes, which is like he's kind of like a Drew Brees, just not that great. The only problem I have with the offense is that the receivers are a really big problem. Stevie Johnson was like their 3rd, maybe 2nd best receiver before he got hurt, and now he might be out for the year. So now they have nobody besides what's his name, Keenan Allen. There we go. But Melvin Gordon, I think, will be better than he was last year. I mean, he's a good running back. He's gonna be good at some point. He just took a little bit. I think their defensive line is a little bit better than Jonah thinks. I think if Bosa can sign a contract and then play to his capability, they'll be okay, because I like Corey Legit a lot, and Brandon Mebane is a pretty good nose tackle. Linebackers are okay. I mean, Manti Te'o is kind of a problem, but Denzel Perryman could be okay, and I love Ingram from South Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think their defensive line is bad. It's just like running a 3-4, and they're having a hard time getting a pass rush from the outside linebackers.
Right. Yeah. I mean, they only have like. Yeah. Go ahead.
Like this is his 4th year in the league. Like, you gotta be showing more than he's shown so far.
Right.
And they haven't gotten a lot of good work out of their linebackers. I mean, they're starting Denzel Perryman and Manti Te'o as inside linebackers. Jeremiah Adeochu is probably going to be the other outside linebacker. He's shown very little. So I think that their defensive line is good. That's definitely the strength of their defense, aside from Jason Verrett. But if they can't find another person in the secondary, they're just going to not throw to Verrett's side of the field, and they're going to still have a lot of success teams playing against them well.
Right, and Brandon Flowers is old and coming off of an injury. He was an all-pro cornerback when he was on the Chiefs, so if he can find some of that, he could be okay. And adding Casey Hayward as a slot corner is pretty solid for them. Kind of wanted him to go to the Giants, but it makes their corners a little bit better. They still don't really have over-the-top help since they lost Eric Weddle, but all in all, it's a team that tried to get better, still lost some pieces, and really didn't get a whole lot better. I got them at 4-12.
Yeah, I would have them also at 4-12. That's the same thing I have them as. I think they're not necessarily a terrible team. There's good players on this team, including Travis Benjamin, who they just added at receiver. I think he's going to work well with Rivers. But this is a team with a lot of holes on it, and they're in a division that we both think is going to be pretty tough. And I think they're clearly the weakest team in it, so I think this is going to be another unsuccessful year for San Diego. Right,
which sucks because they were 13-3 like 5 years ago, it seems like, but, well, it seems like shorter than that, but it was probably longer than that.
Well, was trying like hell to get them out of San Diego. And
still is.
Eventually on the LA bid to the Rams. So now it's kind of an awkward situation back in San Diego, trying to get the taxpayers to build them a new stadium, which, as we both know, is a classic team owner ripoff move.
Right.
They'll probably cave in and do it. The Chargers will be there forever, and the stadium will be able to do it at the end of time.
All right, so let's get to my favorite team in this division, the Raiders. They did a lot. Offensively, not much. Still with the nice trio of Carr, Crabtree, and Cooper, the 3 C's that I just realized. Other than Crabtree and Cooper, they have no depth at receiver. I mean, they do, but not what you'd want. They did sign Cliche Osemele from the Ravens to play on the offensive line, which makes their offensive line better because that was a problem for Carr. He was on his back a little too often. But their defense is what really changed. They got crazy good, kind of overnight. Their linebacking core right now is Khalil Mack. They play a 3-4. So Khalil Mack, Bruce Irvin, Malcolm Smith, and possibly Shalik Calhoun. They also signed Demontre Moore from the Giants, who is crazy good. He's just a head case and commits personal fouls more than he tackles players. So that's a problem. They drafted Jihad Ward out of Illinois, who's a good pass rusher with some promise. But then their secondary got so much better. They added Reggie Nelson, Carl Joseph through the draft, and signed Sean Smith. So they did a lot defensively to get better. Defense was their weakness last year. It was okay, but it wasn't great. And now I think it's pretty darn good. I think they'll definitely be a top 10 defense and possibly pushing top 5.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with the fact that defense is much better. This is a much improved team. There's no doubt about that. I'm not sure that the Raiders are the right place to develop a head case player into a good player. It's not exactly the most orderly organization.
They're turning over a new leaf.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think Jack Del Rio is the best coach they've had in a long time.
For the second time around.
Right. But yeah, I mean, I think this team that has goals, you can have worse problems than not having a good third receiver. And I mean, if you look across the division at the Chiefs, we'll talk about in a minute, they don't even have a second receiver. So I think you could do worse than the problems that the Raiders have. I think I'm not sure if I'm all the way there on the Raiders as a playoff team yet, because there's some pieces on this team that I could see having a hard time kind of gelling together, at least in the first year that they're together. I think this team will make the playoffs in the next couple of years, but I'm not sold that they're going to make it this year. I don't know, that's probably just cautious me and like being biased about how bad the Raiders have been recently and just how unremarkable. But I do believe in Derek Carr. I think he's a solid, at least league average quarterback. I think that's what he's going to be. And they have Connor Cook as a backup who I liked a lot throughout college. I know I liked him a little more than you did. But I think that this is a more cohesive team than they've had in the past, which definitely means something.
Yeah, I mean, you and I talked about it a little bit ago, how if Amari Cooper can make the jump from a very good receiver to an excellent receiver, the depth at receiver doesn't really matter anymore. I mean, like, looking at Atlanta, you have Julio Jones, who's probably the best receiver in the NFL, and you have nobody else. And, like, Roddy White has been non-existent for a couple of years. He's not even on the team now. But you saw how good Julio Jones was and how Matt Ryan could work with just one receiver. So if Amari Cooper can...
Yeah, I mean, the situation that comes to mind for me is the Lions when Dustin Johnson was around.
Right, that's also... Yeah. But they even have more than that because, I mean, Michael Crabtree is no joke. Like, he was a great receiver in college. He was a good receiver in San Fran. And he's a good receiver in Oakland. Like, the kid's good. So, they still have good receivers. I think Derek Carr is going to get better and better and better the more he gets some experience. He's already getting better. You can watch from game to game pretty much. He gets better. And Jonah doesn't like Latavius Murray that much. I don't like him that much either. But I think he can fill the void of a running back position for pretty much any team. But this is about to shock Jonah. I have the Raiders at 11-5, winning the division and making the playoffs.
Yeah, I'm not quite as high on them as that. I have the Raiders at 9-7, just missing out of the playoffs. I think that they're definitely worth a 2-game improvement from last year when they finished 7-9. I think it's definitely an improved team. I think this is like 2 years away from them now, in my mind.
So you had the Broncos at what?
10-6.
Alright, so you have... Gotcha. Alright, so they'll be third in the division by your standards, right? Unless you have the Chiefs less than that.
Yeah, I'm not in love with any of the teams in this division. We'll talk about the Chiefs.
Yeah, I'm kind of assuming you have the Chiefs winning, but anyways, yeah, I think the Raiders I could see the Raiders missing the playoffs, and I could also see them winning the division. They're on like that line of having a chance to be great or not being that great and underperforming. Jonah probably will end up being right in this because generally teams that don't have that experience can't take that massive jump, so they might take a couple of years to get there. But regardless, in a couple of years, the Raiders will be talked about as one of the better teams in that division and maybe even in the AFC.
Yeah, because the Broncos and Chiefs are on the downswing and the Raiders are on the upswing.
Right.
Both go before this team is winning a division, I think.
Yeah. So Al Davis can rest a little bit easier.
Yeah.
So we'll get to the Chiefs now, the last team in the division. They really did a whole lot of nothing, kind of status quo this offseason. They did need to address some things offensively, in my opinion, which they didn't really do. And their defense is old and injured, but still good. I love Marcus Peters. I mean, as a rookie, he was excellent. I can't imagine how he's going to be now. But other than that, there's not much to love about this team, in my opinion.
No, I actually agree with you. I actually don't have this team winning the division. I actually have the Broncos winning it. I don't like the Chiefs that much either. I think if you look up and down their roster, and there's some pieces that jump out: Jamal Charles, Justin Houston, Tampa Hawley. The problem is
they're all broken.
Are currently on the PUP list, physically unable to perform. So.
And they are every year, so your body can only go through that so many times before it just completely breaks.
Something out of some of them, but you're not going to get something out of all of them.
Right.
Those are the two best players. I think most people would agree. You could probably throw Eric Berry in there as well. But I'm not a big fan of the team not doing anything this summer. I mean, I understand they're counting on getting those guys back, and they're pretty much rolling the dice on that. And if they do, that team will probably make the playoffs. But I mean, they're rolling out Derek Johnson. They just gave him more money. Like, he's old now. I mean, he was the first round pick in 05. Like, that's a long time to be in the league. Like, especially after this like inside linebacker, Reed's kind of pushing it for being really and they just gave Eric Fisher the extension on staff. The line, especially the interior line, doesn't look that strong to me. Alex Smith can only take you as far as the rest of the team. Like, he will take you as far as the rest of the team can take you. He's an average quarterback, but he's not going to rise you above that. And that worked fine when he was on the 49ers because he had a really, really good team around him. But I don't think he does here, and I think Andy Reid is one of the more overrated coaches in the league. So I don't think he's going to be able to get the most out of this team. I don't have this team making the playoffs.
Yeah.
I can tell you that.
Yeah, I mean, like, offensively, they can survive without Jamal Charles. We kind of saw that last year. Sarkandrick West was pretty good. Spencer Ware was pretty good. Travis Kelce is quickly developing as one of the best tight ends in the game. And Jeremy Maclin's an able-bodied receiver who can be good or can be pretty bad. But somehow this team was just not that great last year either, and rattled off crazy wins left and right to make the playoffs. So, I mean, they didn't get better, they didn't necessarily get worse, and they were just as good last year. So I don't understand how they won last year, but I kind of have them doing the same thing this year, and I got them at 10-6, so that would be second place in this division. I think that would be a playoff spot, but I don't really want to say that they're going to make the playoffs because I don't want them to. I kind of hate the Chiefs because Andy Reid, and I hate Alex Smith too because he's not a quarterback. That's a joke. He's a game manager. But for the purposes of the podcast, I'll say they go 10-6 and get a wild card spot.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a fluke last year. The point differential was far better than the Broncos who won the division. Like, this was a legitimate good team last year. But I think that they're just kind of rolling with everyone else 1 year older while teams around them are improving. And think they're going to go 9-7 along with the Raiders and just miss on the playoffs.
So, in your standards, that's going to be a great division. 10-6, 9-7, 9-7, and then the Chargers.
Yeah, that's. I think that. Yeah, I think there's going to be a bunch of 9-7 teams in the AFC. Like, I think there's a bunch of teams that are on that caliber. And so I think that that's what makes it possible to me that two of those teams will go 9-7 and they'll make the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, the oddball in the division is the Broncos, because if they get solid enough quarterback play to win games, they're going to win the division. But if they don't,
Right.
then
Betting on half.
right, then if they don't, it's kind of up for grabs with the Raiders and the Chiefs, and the Raiders are kind of like the good luck story, like on the upswing. Hopefully they can get something going after so long of being so bad. Like there's some intrigue in the division. I think the Chargers could surprise people just because Phillip Rivers is good enough to win some games, but they're not going to win the division. But yeah, I think it'll be a good division, and I'm really hoping the Raiders win because I like a lot of the plays on that team, and I think they could be interesting to watch in a playoff setting.
I'm just the guy here rooting for the Mark Sanchez redemption story. That's all.
In all honesty, though, could you imagine a playoff game in Oakland with those fans?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't seen it for a long time.
That's what I'm saying. I don't know what it looks like. That's what I'm asking if you can imagine it.
Well, when they're the Las Vegas Raiders, maybe it'll be different.
All right. So that's our AFC West. Now we will go to the AFC South. And trust me, there will be a lot of disagreeing in this one. We've already talked about it a few times. And let's save the disagreeing for the end. Let's start with the Titans.
Yeah, we're not going to disagree too much on the Titans. So.
Exactly.
I mean, you know, I think for the Titans, the main question to ask is, like, what are they doing? Like, what is the plan here? They don't seem to be going much of anywhere. I mean, Mike Mularkey is the head coach, for starters, before we even get to the roster. Like, you could not possibly pick a more uninspired choice to be the head coach of your young and developing team than Mike Mularkey, who was fired after one season with the Jaguars, which tells you the kind of credibility he has. I think that this roster is really just a mishmash. I feel bad for Marcus Mariota because he's a quarterback with a lot of potential, and he's still got a team that has a plan to really improve him. Neither of us like their draft at all, and they really had a chance to do well, and they made a good move by trading out of the first pick. They didn't need to be in that spot, but they went and took Jack Conklin, a guy who's probably a career right tackle, which doesn't solve their offensive line problem. And then in the second round, they went and took a running back, Derrick Henry, after they had already traded for DeMarco Murray, who had a bad last couple of years. So, and this is before even getting to their defense, which is
a joke.
Like a fireball, different variety. But I think the one bright spot on this offense, besides Mariota, is Ken Wright. I think he's a very solid receiver. I even think Doyle Green back on has a lot of potential, and they just signed Andre Johnson for some reason.
And Rashard Matthews.
Yeah, also true. But they have 8 receivers that all have a maybe 25% chance of being good. So I don't think we're going to get out of that. But it's just pretty guessy to me.
Yeah, so let's talk about the running backs for a second. So last year they had Antonio Andrews was probably the best running back, and he was okay. Nothing that's okay at best. He was shaky most of the time. So what they did in free agency was they traded for DeMarco Murray. Okay, that works. Now you got a good starting running back. But then they drafted Derrick Henry, who's a younger version of DeMarco Murray. So that's a little confusing.
Yep.
Then they signed Dexter McCluster to play running back in free agency. A little more confusing. And they still have Antonio Andrews. So now you have 4 running backs, all of which...
Also, Bishop Sankey.
I think they might have cut him. But, actually, no, you're right. They still have him. So, that's another good running back, who they drafted, actually. I mean, you got 5 running backs, and none of them really are promising at this point. A lot of people don't think Derrick Henry will be that good. I think he'll be okay. DeMarco Murray's towards the end of his career. McCluster's no more than a punt return, kick returner, one big play here and there kind of guy. Andrews isn't that great, and I like Bishop Sankey too, but he doesn't ever get a chance, so I don't know. But then wide receivers, Kendall Wright is great. Jonah was right about that. Andre Johnson's old and hopefully can just run like a 10-yard curl and stand there and catch a pass. Dorial Green-Beckham will be good. Delaney Walker's a really good tight end. He's more of a receiver than a tight end, but he's still pretty solid. But yeah, their offense is okay. I mean, Marcus Mariota has things to work with, but the defense sucks. Like, they have no good defensive linemen except for Jarrell Casey, who's, I guess, good at best. I do like Brian Orakpo a lot and think he can be good. Derek Morgan's old but still can be a good pass rusher. And they drafted Kevin Dodd from Clemson, who can be a good pass rusher. But they didn't really, it's like a mismatch.
Yeah, I mean, they're rolling out, like, Parrish Cox and Bryce McCain as, like, prominent members of their secondary.
Right, who at best are, like, slot corners or maybe even backup corners on other teams.
Yeah, I mean, their best players on defense are Jarrell Casey, Brian Orakpo, who's getting up there in years, and Jason McCourty, who's, like, the less good McCourty brother.
Yeah, but he's still good. Make no doubt about that.
Right. It's just there's a lot of holes on this defense. Like, you can, it's similar to San Diego, and then you can just throw it at the side of the field that McCourty's not on. And like, they signed Antoine Blake from Pittsburgh. Like, really just grasping at stuff on this second, and like they're giving prominent roles to, like, Wesley Woodyard and and Parrish Cox. Like I said, like I'm not a big fan of this defense, even with the great Dick LeBeau as defensive coordinator. I don't know what anyone could do with this defense.
Yeah, it seems like they kind of put all these older guys into a hat, and like the guys that never made a name for themselves then set the hat on the table and just like selected names out of it, and they're like, oh, let's go sign him. They're like, in Brian Orakpo's case, he was always supposed to be good, always was good when he was on the field, never was healthy, and then now is getting up in age. And they signed him to like a solid enough contract that you'd be like, wow, that's kind of expensive for someone that hasn't really proved himself in a long time. Parrish Cox and Bryce McCain are not the greatest ever. Andre Johnson is like walking on crutches right now. So like it's odd what they did.
Yeah, I think odd. There's not any move that they made that tells me that they have a plan.
Right. Which is terrible for a rookie quarterback. That's like the last thing you'd ever want to hear. Or a second-year quarterback, sorry.
Yeah, when you have a quarterback like that, you want to build something coherent around him at least. I mean, the Bucs are at least trying to execute a thing around James. I mean, who knows how well it'll work, but like the Titans are not even like rolling with any kind of plan right now.
Right. Which is why I have them at 4-12, and that might be generous, but I'm just trying to give them a slight improvement.
I have them at 3-13, same as last year. I don't think this team is any better than it was before.
Can we just talk about for 1 second how last year their first game was against Jameis Winston, and they blew them out of the water?
I know, everyone was like, oh my god, the Titans are here.
Yeah, like, why didn't the Bucs pick Marcus Mariota? And then it was like, oh, we're not going to win another game for like 6 months.
Right.
But yeah, alright, so they're not good. Let's get to the fun of this division. I know who we're going to disagree on most, so we'll save it for last. So let's go with the Colts right now, who we will disagree on, but probably not that much. So Andrew Luck was bumped up, banged around all last year. He's hopefully healthy. Nobody really knows, but seems like he could possibly be healthy. Still have T.Y. Hilton, which is nice. Then they added Dorsett from Miami, who's going to be, I think, pretty good, but he's very similar to T.Y. Hilton. Kobe Fleener is a tough loss. because now they have Dwayne Allen, who's always hurt, and nobody else. But I know Jonah likes this pick a lot too. They drafted Ryan Kelly from Alabama to play center. And as we know with Peyton Manning, when he had Jeff Saturday, he was at his best. So Ryan Kelly has the potential to be like a Jeff Saturday to Andrew Luck, which will be nice for them.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think Ryan Kelly was the pick they needed. They've had a lot of problems with their offensive line. However, I don't think they've solved the problems with their offensive line completely.
Correct.
I like the left side of the line. I think Costanzo is at least an average left tackle. I like Ted Newhart a lot. I think he's a good guard. I'm not sold on Denzel Good at right tackle. And I'm also not sold on their running game because I don't think their run blocking is going to be great. Ryan Kelly is known more as a pass blocking center than a run blocking center. And they're rolling out Frank Gore at running back again, who's fine, but he's not going to get you an explosive dimension to your offense.
He's also not getting any younger.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's a problem when your receiving core, you have T.Y. Hilton and both Dorsett, but, like, other than that, you got Dante Moncrief, who's, like, in and out of being good. Like, there's not a lot of explosiveness on this offense.
Right.
That works, especially combined with the fact that 6 of their 11 defensive starters are over the age of 30.
Wow.
Yep, it's Kendall Langford, Arthur Jones, Eric Walden, DeQuell Jackson, Trent Cole, and Mike Adams are all over 30.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, and they didn't really do anything defensively to get better.
No, not really.
So it's like we're gonna add 2 players on offense, get a healthy quarterback, and hope we can go 13-3 again and make the playoffs and be good. But looks like that's not gonna happen.
Yeah, Luck is much better than he played last year.
Absolutely.
One of the best quarterbacks in the league.
He throws a lot of interceptions, which is a problem, but he has to on this team because he has to take chances. If they want to win games, he's got to throw 6 touchdowns. Like, it's like the Saints. You got to score if you want to win.
And he also has, like, no time in the pocket because his offensive line has been just bad for his entire career, pretty much.
Exactly.
And, like, Kelly's going to help with that, but the problem's not solved. And their defense, I mean, with those 6 guys over 30 in the starting lineup, they're also asking Robert Mathis and Darius Butler, both also over 30, to play significant roles in this defense. They're starting Patrick Robinson at corner, who has been unsuccessful everywhere he's been. Like, I don't believe in this defense at all. I think Vontae Davis is, along with Trent Cole, who still has some gas in the tank, I think Vontae Davis is the only really well above average player on that defense, and that worries me.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like, last year I thought they were going to be good. When they, like, adding Andre Johnson, giving Luck a target like that, I thought was huge. And Frank Gore, who they finally now had a running back, like, they've never had a running back ever. Even Peyton Manning's years, like, Edgerrin James was not a good running back. He was just good for that team because everybody's so worried about what Peyton Manning's going to do. So, like, there's never been a good running back in the Colts. They finally got one. They got good receivers. Like, I thought that was going to be the year they take off, add Trent Cole. Mathis was supposed to be healthy, and all that stuff goes downhill, and then they suck, and now they didn't get any better from it.
Yeah, I just don't see... Yeah, I mean, maybe we are pretty much in agreement on this team. I mean, and for the next 2 teams, we will definitely not be. But I think that this Colts team went 8-8 last year. I'm going to put them at 8-8 again. I think, to me, the improvement that we're going to see from Andrew Luck, which we're going to see, because this last year was pretty much his worst-case scenario. But the improvement that we're going to see from Andrew Luck is going to be balanced out by just the aging of the defense. I think the defense will be worse than it was last year, and it wasn't good last year.
Agreed. So I have them at 6-10. I don't think... Yeah, I know. I mean, they get worse defensively and don't get any... They probably got worse offensively, too, besides getting a healthy quarterback. Like, T.Y. Hilton is not good enough to just carry Andrew Luck and vice versa with that offense. So, I don't know. I don't think they're good enough to win games. I think they're going to give up a crap ton of points, and I don't know if they have the firepower to answer those points. But regardless, if they go 8-8, if they go 6-10, 7-9, 9-7, whatever, we don't think they're going to make the playoffs.
Yes, neither of us believe that they will make the playoffs. I think that's fair.
So to teams we're gonna possibly make the playoffs and disagree with, who would you like to start with?
I don't know. Do you want to start with your team or my team?
It's up to you. Whatever you want to argue first.
All right. We'll start with my team to win the division, which is the Houston Texans.
All right.
I like the Texans more than Zach does. We'll find out.
Oh, you'll find out.
But yeah. I mean, I guess I'll make my positive argument for the Texans first. I think that basically this is the team that won the division last year, and they got worse in no area, and they got better in several areas, in my opinion. I think that whatever you think of Brock Osweiler, he's certainly an upgrade over Brian Hoyer at quarterback. I mean, he was at least a competent quarterback with the Broncos. And I think he has a better offensive line in front of him now than he did in Denver. So I think we're going to see a lot of success from Osweiler this year, especially with Bill O'Brien as head coach. He's had a great reputation throughout his career with mentoring young quarterbacks, and I think we're going to see improvement from Osweiler as a result of that. They signed Lamar Miller, who is going to, I think, make up for what Arian Foster, who was certainly declining, produced last year. Neither of us love the Will Fuller pick as a receiver. I'm not going to say that I love that pick. But as long as they do get DeAndre Hopkins back in the fold, which I believe will happen, as long as that happens, I think the receiving core is going to be fine. I think Fuller does have a lot of strengths. He's going to stretch the field. If he can be coached into getting the drops out of his game, I think he's going to be a very solid complement to Hopkins. And if you go look at their defense, they got J.J. Watt, who, it's either him or Von Miller is the best defensive player in the league. And they have like a very young, solid defense. I think Jadeveon Clowney is only going to improve. I think Brian Cushing is still a solid player. They got Vince Wilfork in the middle, who is always a good presence, especially with mentoring a younger defense. And yeah, there's definitely potential weaknesses. Their secondary is not great. I think Jonathan Joseph still has it, and Kareem Jackson is pretty good, but I don't love their safety situation. So there's definitely things that could be improved on this team, but overall, I think basically this is last year's division winner that got better in a number of areas.
Yeah, so to start defensively, I mean, J.J. Watt is healthy for like the first time in a while, and that's kind of scary to think about because he was still the best when he was unhealthy, so what's he going to look like healthy? Vince Wilfork...
He came with 4 broken ribs last year. Like,
yeah,
that's incredible.
Exactly, and he was dominant with that.
Yeah.
Wilfork is going to be good. I really think he'll be great for this team at nose tackle. I like DJ Reader, who they got from Clemson, also to kind of like learn from Vince Wilfork. They think they stole him in the 7th round or 6th round, whatever it was. The linebackers are good. I love Brian Cushing. I've always liked Brian Cushing. I used to be a UFC Trojan fan. It's just like Reggie Bush days, but after that, Brian Cushing, he was good. The defensive backs I don't like at all. Jonathan Joseph was good at best, and now I think he's getting up there in age. I don't know if he still has it. And the free safety and strong safety positions are kind of just a shot in the dark. Offensively, they did get better. Lamar Miller is someone I don't necessarily like at running back, but at least he can be on the field more often than Arian Foster, and he's better than Alfred Blue. So that's a positive. I really don't like Osweiler at all either. I did come out of college, then when I watched him in Denver, I thought he was a joke, but he's better than Brian Hoyer. So all of the things that Jonah said are correct.
All I'm saying.
Receiving-wise, Jonah said we don't like Fuller. I just don't like, I don't know, something about him I don't like. He's going to be an okay receiver, and he will stretch the top of the defenses big time, so that's going to be helpful. Hopkins already ended his holdout after a whopping like 14 hours, so that's nice. I do like Jalen Strong a lot as a receiver. I don't know if he's going to get a chance, but I like him. And someone that we haven't talked about yet, Braxton Miller. I love Braxton Miller. thought he was a good quarterback at Ohio State. Then when I watched him athletically play as running back and wide receiver and everything, make the plays and catches he made, I was really impressed. So I think he can be great for the Texans. Kind of play like an Oregon style hybrid role, like a little bit of running back, a little bit of receiver, a little bit of return, all that kind of stuff. And they also got Cecil Shorts, who is an able-bodied receiver. All that being said, I think the teams that they are going to play this year, I think the AFC is better this year than it was last year. I'll start by saying that. And the Texans are along the lines of exact same as they were last year. For that reason, I want to say they were going to go 8-8, but I will say they'll go 9-7.
Yeah, I mean, just to go back, right, that's the same record they had last year, so you're not saying they got worse, which is fair.
Yeah, because they really couldn't get worse. They were in a very weak division where...
They were definitely a division winner last year, but I don't think this division is significantly improved. I think the AFC is improved, but I don't think that this division itself is far better than it was last year. I know you're going to disagree. We're going to talk about yeah, I mean, I like Braxton Miller a lot, too. If it were me, if anything happens to Osweiler, I'm putting Braxton Miller at quarterback before I put Brandon Weeden anywhere near the position.
Yeah, well, you have experience in that, but I would agree with you also.
I do. I'm not a Browns fan, but I have enough experience with Brandon Weeden from his short tenure with the Cowboys. But yeah, I think that Houston's going to win the division again. I don't think it's going to be a huge improvement. I think they'll go 10-6, but I think that they're going to win the division comfortably by a couple of games, and they might be able to make some noise in the playoffs. I'm not sure exactly what I think of Osweiler yet because evaluating him in Denver was tough for a couple of reasons. I mean, he had a solid supporting cast around him, which would help his cause, but he was also kind of thrown into the fire in the middle of the season and kind of tricked around with whether he was the starter or not.
Yeah, and I do believe he played with a restricted offense there. They didn't really give him the full reins.
He does.
Yeah, and I mean, he played in a spread offense, high-powered, high-scoring offense at Arizona State. Like, the kid can throw the ball around. He was known as a gunslinger, and he didn't show any of that when he was playing for Denver. So I'm interested to see if that comes out or what. But they did get better.
Yeah, I think that Will Fuller being around will help to unleash that.
Yeah, and I mean, DeAndre Hopkins is very obviously a great receiver.
Yeah, no doubt.
So I think that the Titans and Colts I think the Colts more so than the Titans can steal a few games out of this division. I think the Titans might be able to get one or two, but I do think Andrew Luck is good enough to take a couple, so I could see Houston faltering a little bit in that area. But let's go to the Jaguars now, who I really, really, really like. Jonah's not so sold on Blake Bortles yet, but I think he's good now and going to get better. They had T.J. Yeldon and Denard Robinson at running back last year, which worked out pretty well. Then you add to that Chris Ivory and Jonas Gray. I think that's a really, really, really good backfield. The receivers were good last year, Allen Robinson, Allen Hurns, and they're young, so I think they can only get better. Then you have Julius Thomas and Mercedes Lewis at tight end, which I think is pretty solid. I'll stop there and let Jonah talk about the offense a little bit too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sold on Bortles yet, like you said. I mean, I understand, like, he's throwing for a lot of yards. There's no doubt about that. I want to see his accuracy get to where it needs to be before I'm a Blake Bortles believer. I think that, obviously, Hurns and Robinson are solid receivers. I don't see a lot beyond them. I think the loss of Cecil Shorts is going to hurt because Marquise Lee has shown pretty much nothing so far in his NFL career.
He has a chance, though.
No, yeah, he certainly has the talent. He was great at USC, but we've seen great USC receivers not do well in the NFL before, with the biggest case in point being Dwayne Jarrett, I think. But I think I still don't like this offensive line at all. It doesn't look really any better than it used to me. I mean, they did get Calvin Beachum, who's going to help, but, like, they're rolling out two former Dallas backups as starters, Mackenzie Bernardo and Jeremy Parnell. which doesn't inspire a lot of confidence in me, having seen plenty of both of those guys. And like, I do like the Chris Ivory signing, but I feel like it wasn't the best allocation of resources because I think you got to hand the reins to TJ Yeldon. I think you got to say he's our back. We should roll with it. And I don't love what they did on the offense. I don't think their offense is really improved in my mind. Obviously, the defense is improved, though. You want to.
Yeah. So I love this defense. Like, this is like, I like the Raiders defense. I love this defense. So the biggest thing to me is 2 years ago in the draft, they drafted Dante Fowler with the 3rd pick out of Florida. Didn't even step on the field. In the first workout he tore his ACL and missed the entire year. So you're adding him. Okay, so that's the 3rd pick in the draft that you're adding. Basically, twice. Then you drafted Jalen Ramsey this year, who's very, very, very good. You're adding to that Malik Jackson, Jared Odrick. You have Posluszny, Miles Jack, Skuda, Telvin Smith. You signed Prince Mukamara. You have Jonah will agree that this secondary is really good. Ramsey, Prince, House, Cyprin, Tayshaun Gibson. I mean, the secondary is really good. And then you have, obviously, Fowler is good. Put him next to Malik Jackson. That's even better. Jared Odrick can hold his own. And someone that I talked about in the draft preview, Yannick Ngakoue out of Maryland, who's been showing great things in their camp so far. He's going to make some noise as a pass rusher, I promise you that. And if Miles Jack ever gets fully healthy, this defense is going to be really, 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 really good.
Yeah, there's no doubt that if the pieces fall into place, this is going to be one of the best defenses in the AFC. There's no doubt about that. However, these 3 young guys that you're talking about, all really great players when they're healthy. Dante Fowler, Miles Jack, Jalen Ramsey. However, we've already seen an entire lost season to a torn ACL for Dante Fowler. We've never seen him play in the NFL before. Now, there's a reason he was picked that high, but in the same vein as David Clowney, I think this guy will be good eventually, but I think it's going to take a little bit, in the same way that it did for Clowney. I don't think he's going to be this amazing player right away. Now, that's okay, because they have Jared Odrick and Malik Jackson, but I'm not counting on Dante Fowler to give you a ton right away. Miles Jack's injury concerns are obviously well documented.
Correct.
He's not currently injured, but there's obviously major injury concerns with him. And then Jalen Ramsey already suffered a small meniscus tear during this offseason. So, like, if these pieces all fall into place, then it's going to be fine, and we're not going to even think about those things again. But I do think that it's worth considering, just looking at those guys and, like, understanding that it might not fall into place. I do like their secondary regardless, though. I mean, Gibson's great. I like Davon House. I mean, I don't love Prince Mukamara, but if he's your 3rd corner...
Freaking tell me about it.
Yeah, well, right, exactly. You know all about that. But yeah, there's a lot of talent on this defense. The thing is, I don't know, where I stand on the Jaguars is basically like, let's not get crazy. Like, they're certainly improved, but they also went 5-11 last year.
Right, you're in the same spot as you are with the Raiders. Like, you feel the same way.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And like, I think I trust the Raiders to have more success this year because I think it's a similar amount of improvement, but the Raiders won 2 more games than Jacksonville did last year.
Right.
So I think that while the Jaguars are certainly a better team than they were last year, in order for them to win the division, they'd have to be probably 5 games better. I think you think they will be, but I don't see 5 games better on this team. I see 2 to 3.
So my argument to the argument that you just made is that first of all, I think Fowler will get. I think he has a chance to get 10 sacks, and I think he's going to be close to that number. And anything more than that is just a complete bonus. But say he's not that good. Say he gets hurt again. You still have Malik Jackson and Jared Odrick, which is a very solid defensive line, right? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, no, there's no doubt. And I think Roy Miller's solid. I don't love Tyson Alualu, but...
Yeah, but they still have pieces that can work.
Yeah.
And then linebacking-wise... Paul Posluszny is a good linebacker. He's a very good middle linebacker that nobody hears about because he's in Jacksonville, first of all. But coming out of college, he was supposed to be good, and he lived up to it. And Telvin Smith is a very good young linebacker as well. So again, they have pieces. And then what?
It's just the way to the Raiders. They have to gel.
Yeah, right. And I mean, health is a big thing for this team.
Yeah, I just don't like it. If this were a different organization, in the same way as I felt about the Raiders, I feel differently about the team if it was a different organization. Like maybe I'm putting too much emphasis on that, and it's definitely possible that I am. But I'm taking kind of a wait and see approach with the Jaguars. I'm gonna put Jacksonville at 7-9.
And I got Jacksonville at 10-6 and winning the division. Yeah. So, like Jonah said, 5 games better to win the division. I have them at 5 games better.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's certainly possible, again, like the Raiders, that this team is going to win the division in the near future. Because this isn't a strong division. Like,
right.
I don't think the Texans are a very strong division leader, but I think that they've done enough to stay on top. I think Jacksonville's going to improve, but I don't think they're going to improve drastically.
Right, and we talked all about the defense, the Jaguars, and the receivers and all that stuff. But to win the division, it's going to solely depend on how good Bortles is and how much better he gets this year, which I'm expecting him to get better. And I think he already was pretty good. So it really all comes down to the quarterback. This is a quarterback-driven league, and we'll see what happens there.
Yeah, so our division winners for those 2 divisions, we had different winners for both divisions, correct? You have Oakland and Jacksonville.
Which is unreal to say, but yes.
I have status quo Denver and Houston.
Yeah.
So.
But I think Houston could possibly grab a wild card. Possibly. If they, like in my division winners, I think they could.
I have both my wild cards in the AFC coming from next week's podcast, so we'll talk about that then.
Yeah, all right. So next week will be AFC East and AFC North, the 2 best divisions in this conference, and I think there'll be some more disagreements. But yeah, so we're gonna what?
I'm excited to talk about those. I'm excited to.
Yeah, I was looking at the North. I really enjoy the North. I think it's gonna be a battle.
Yeah, and we get to trash on Cleveland, so it'll be great.
Exactly. So next week is AFC East and AFC North, and then the following week will be NFC South and West. And finally, we're going to end with a bang and talk about the NFC East and NFC North. So that's it for this week. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back next week with part 2.